It's going to go for 66 sessions plus minus. So because it's every Friday and Saturday, that means that it's about 30 weeks, 35 plus minus weeks. And we're going to cover the whole program. Actually, it's going to consist of the Bhagavad Gita, the Panchadasi, written by Vidyaranya, and Narad Bhakti Sutra. And so it's going to embody the whole program. So I'm just going to talk about, start with 3 stages of Vedanta. And the 3 stages of Vedanta is important because it's going to let you know what are the qualifications to actually, just to listen. And this is just something that's a reminder for us that's going to help us to get along very well together. And the first qualification in Vedanta, it's called Shravana. Shravana is a Sanskrit word, and basically it means listening. So just like you and I have been talking, listening is the hardest part. The reason for this is that when the brain remembers something, over time it forms strong neurological connections, and they're set and fixed in their ways. And the older we get, the more those neurological cells get set in their ways. So it's harder to accept something that is contrary to what's already established as knowledge. So Shravana involves just pretending for a while, for 1.5 hours, that just like when we put our shoes outside, similarly we choose to put what we think we know, our knowledge outside. Well, everything we read, everything we heard, everything we listened to, we're just going to put it outside and suspend that so that the knowledge can have a chance to actually reach you. And it's the most difficult stage, of course, because listening is hard. We just want to interject, we want to say something, we want to add our own opinion. So if that happens, just hold that off for a minute and you'll see how that opinion or whatever it is going to auto-dissolve anyway. And then the answer is going to, reveal itself shortly after. So we need to discard our opinions, beliefs that contradict the knowledge. And Vedanta is not, for that reason, popular because most of the things that is taught is going to be completely contradictory to your actual experience. And most people will walk out, and I've seen this over many times because these ideas are so set that the mind thinks there's no way this can be true. But Vedanta is not from yesterday. It's a 5,000+ year old methodology. It's a very well thought out system. Written by many enlightened sages, and it's cross-checked, it's self-verified, and it's self-critically evaluated. Means even Vedanta criticizes itself so that it can make sure that it's on the point, on track. And if you can find a system that does this, you're glad to, please let me know. So Vedanta is a very safe system because it cross-checks its own references against actual experience for the universal, for human beings. The second stage, so the first stage is just listen. The second stage is manana. And this manana really involves reflection. So in other words, just like in any subject, when you hear something, what happens is you reflect on that. Okay, you reflect, how does this apply to my life? So stage 1, we listen, and then stage 2, you're obviously going to be performing outside in the real world. That is when you start to reflect. Like, how does what I heard in the class, how does this apply to this world? And at this second stage, you're absolutely convinced that you are awareness, consciousness. You're absolutely convinced. But in the second stage, there's still doubts, okay? And this is a surprise for most people because we have a notion that we think enlightenment or liberation or freedom is a one-off. Once we think it's an event, and once it happens, all the problems are solved. That's not true. That's a false notion, and it's very prevalent in the spiritual world, and we have to throw that out. Enlightenment is nothing but the knowing between who I am versus who I am not. And we're going to talk between Satya and between Mithya. There are two orders of the one same existence. And this stage manana is typically about 10 years. So listening for 5 years, manana for 10 years, and the third stage, which is nididhyasana, this is a plus minus 15 years. And 15 years, this is mainly the third stage based on the lack of satisfaction despite knowing who I am. So this may be another surprise, is that we think that once moksha is, once I'm self-realized, that all problems are going to be solved and I'm going to be happy, everything's going to be okay, and I'm going to be eternally peaceful. Yes, maybe that's true, but maybe that's also not. What we observe is that because the brain is still there, the neurons are still there, the conditions from parents and society from early childhood is still there, it's gonna, there's gonna be a tug of war, there's gonna be a battle there. The only difference now is I'm gonna recognize that whatever happens, that's not me. So whatever happens in the mind, happens to this body, it's got nothing to do with me, because that whole body, mind, reality is everything underneath this line. I am above this line. But because I haven't fully solved all of my personal problems and resolved them, then there's still a lack of satisfaction. So this is the stage 3, and we have to also cover, that's about 15 years of your life. So it just gives you an idea that this isn't something that occurs in a month or 2 months and then you're good to go. This happens till the last breath. So you're listening, you're contemplating, and you're doing your sadhana in the form of nididhyasana. So that's the 3 stages of Vedanta. It just sort of sets the tone of what's expected. I'm just going to read a few more criteria. Is that a lot of us in the spiritual world have a bunch of notions, and like I said, this is worth repeating, and we pick them up from different sources, different books, and even from our own self-study. We interpreted what we read in a certain way and we're convinced by it. Now this is a big problem, because how does one get to you and say, look, what you read could have been true, but also maybe it's not. So let's just recognize that maybe what I've read, or maybe what I've listened, or maybe what I heard at that time wasn't the full picture. So maybe I just have to identify that maybe I'm lacking the full picture, so therefore let me be open to what Vedanta is going to teach me. And in Vedanta, we don't miss anything. We cover psychology, we cover the mind, the body, and we cover the self, and we cover the sadhana, what to practice. So we say, once you're in the Vedanta bus, you're good to go, you're taken care of. So Vedanta misses nothing, because we realize that if I just say to you, you are pure consciousness, you probably heard that before. Your awareness, you're eternal. You heard that before, no doubt. If I just say, that's not good enough, is it? Okay. That's because we have to work in a certain way until you're completely convinced that that's who I am and there's nothing more to investigate. And that's when seeking stops. So Vedanta causes the result of why am I here? It causes seeking to stop. And when seeking stops, that basically means that I have total certainty who I am versus who I am not. And then there's no more reason to read books or to, even though you're probably going to still read because it's just so lovely to read this knowledge. But you're not reading it out of a secret intention of discovering something you probably don't know. You see the difference? Before seeking, is always this, I'm lacking something, so I'm reading this in the hopes to fill that gap. But after the seeking stops, which is what the purpose of Vedanta is, I still continue to read and listen, but it's no longer as a motivation out of trying to fill a need or trying to complete myself. No, I'm already complete. It's just that I just choose to be there because I got nothing else to do, for example. And questions. We need to ask questions, and a good Vedanta student is the one that asks questions. The reason is because those questions are relevant to you, so no matter how basic or advanced they are, you need to ask them. Because when you do, and I answer, we need to clear that doubt. And as long as that doubt is lurking, it's going to be a problem. It's just going to fog up your listening ability. And we're going to do questions starting next week so that we can first re-establish the terminology so we're on the same page. And finally, also, one more point is there's no skipping here. I will say some parts, by the way, none of this is mine, this is not my teaching. I'm just a mouthpiece for Vedanta because I don't know anything. I just know how to sleep, how to eat, and how to survive. So my only job is just to pass this tradition, this Vedanta Sampradaya, which means tradition, onto you. So none of this is my teaching, just to establish that fact. The only reason I'm teaching this is because it's worked for me, it's ended my search, and I've seen it work for countless others who have been on the search for decades. We're talking like even in their 80s and 90s and 70s. They come to Vedanta classes, they still haven't figured out, their seeking still hasn't stopped. So, we address that. And Vedanta, like I said, causes the seeking to stop as a result of being very clear and succinct and precise in the words and how they're delivered. And I'll also be telling some parts you don't want to hear. That's very obvious in the faces, the ugly bits. And the ugly bits are usually the ones that you need to hear, but the world, the spiritual world isn't going to tell you because they know you're going to walk out, and they're depending on your company, probably, maybe not, your donations. We don't care. We just said how it is, what it is, whether you like it or not. It just has to be said. So be prepared to hear the ugly bits amongst the good bits also. Because if I just say the good bits, I'm actually, concealing something, and that's not a duality. See, Maya, everything below the line, involves both the good and the bad, and the ugly. So we have to mention everything. It is also important that you put faith. It sounds like a religion when I say this, but faith simply means that I'm able to suspend what I think I know just for a while to give this a chance to work, or give this chance to work on me, or to help me to, realize who I am and what I am and who I am not. So faith is important in the teaching and the teacher, that what you're going to be taught is we don't hold anything back. We're following the tradition to the line, how it's taught, and we know it works, and that's exactly what's being delivered to the listener. And the reason it works is, it's actually good news, is that Maya is so logical and predictable that by following its laws, you cannot not realize who you are. It's impossible not to realize if you follow the system. And my job is to show you and guide you through the system from A to Z. If Maya was unpredictable, we would have no chance of moksha. Because if I do one thing today, it's completely devoid or erased tomorrow. So the reason this is possible is because Maya is logical, it's sequential, and it's as logical as 2 + 2. You know how to arrive to the answer. You cannot have 5, you're always going to have 4. So if Vedantists followed A to Z, you're going to arrive to the ultimate supreme reality of who you are. That is the awareness itself. Okay. And that sums up our criteria for the qualifications. Any questions so far? Okay, cool. Okay, so before we begin with the invocation, this is going to involve 3 parts. This is the program. The program goes for about 1 year, as I said, and it involves 3 parts. The first part is karma yoga, that is emotion management. The reason we first started with emotion management is emotions are obstacles to intelligence. And this is where you could say this intellect here, you need this intellect to be completely clear. If it's not clear, then moksha is not, it's not possible, because it's clouded by emotionality. It's clouded by feelings. So we first have to address those feelings and those emotions before we're primed for the second stage of Vedanta, which is self-knowledge. So just getting back to first stage of emotions, is that you probably heard this phrase before, blind love. When people fall in love, what happens? Then they're just completely madly in love, right? And as a result of that, they lose their discrimination towards each other. They don't see each other's potential flaws, if you want to call them that, or they don't even get into the mode of probably assessing, is this going to be a problem in the future? They're completely clouded by this emotion of biological, chemical processes happening in the body. So this is just one example how emotions have to be addressed first before self-knowledge works. And self-knowledge is the second stage. This is the stage of the self and Maya. We have to understand both. We're not just going to talk about self, because see, for example, the beautiful text, the Vivekachudamani, written by Shankara, it says, liberation isn't about knowing who you are, it's about knowing who you are not. Yeah? And this is unfortunately, if you want to call it unfortunately, what the neo-teachers are lacking. I mean, God bless them, they're inspiring a lot of people. By the way, I will be mentioning names because we need to give examples. They're only going to cover the self. In other words, they're going to tell you who you are. But as the text says, liberation is about knowing who you are not. So that means we have to know what Maya is. Okay, we have to know what Maya is, Isvara, God. We have to know what Creator is. Because if we don't, then the one that's trying to attain moksha, that one is a result of what? Maya. So you can't discard Maya, because the one that's discarding Maya is Maya. You see how it can't work? And the one that's thinking, like in Neo World, the Neo World discards like, oh, it's just the world, you just go to the self and stay in awareness. How can you say that when the one that's doing that, including the body and the intellect and the mind and the thought processes, are all a consequence of Maya? So there's no logic there. So that's why we have to know absolutely what is this whole Maya about. And when you know that, you can automatically discount it, and then what's left is you, awareness, self. Okay. And a few more points to cover. And lastly, the third stage of Vedanta comes from Narada Bhakti Sutras, and this is about love. This is where we will talk about more getting to non-dual aspect of this teaching. Because in the first part, knowledge, the second part, and the first part, we're going to discriminate between self and not self. We're going to discriminate constantly between the self and the not self. Anything underneath the line is not self. Anything above the line is self. So we're going to be constantly discriminating. Now the question may arise, well, Advaita means not two. Okay? And here we are discriminating as if there are two. So that's because this is a preliminary step. We first have to discriminate and know clearly what is the self and what is the non-self before we can recognize that they're actually one and the same. There's no difference. Okay, so love, it's actually a very nice chapter. It's a text, and it's going to be talking about you as non-dual eternal love. Okay, so we're going to begin the teaching. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. This is actually a beautiful opening invocation, and it's there to address both the student and the teacher, that both need to participate in the teaching, and the teacher is as much subject to the environment, how they feel in the moment, as much as is the student. So they both have to understand that we're both subject to psychology, to maybe what happened, yesterday, some conversations we had, and all these things, they sometimes stay in our minds. So we're just agreeing that we're not going to argue, because, the argument is just a subject to, conflict, and we have to understand we're just human beings, and we're trying the best that we can in the moment, for both from the teacher side to teach and from the student side to listen. And so, in that case, we're both nourished together. And we strive together, of course, to both impart the teaching from the teacher's side and from the student's side to receive the teaching. So we have to be willing for that transaction to occur, so we can have an agreement. And may our learning shine. This is not only addressing the student, but also the teacher. When the teacher teaches, it's also a teaching on this side as much as it is on that side. So everyone's both learning and also receiving and sending. So it's just, there's no difference between either side. And as I said earlier, this is not my teaching. My job is just to let Isvara speak through me in accordance with the tradition of Vedanta Sampradaya. So do not put any credit on the teacher, put the credit on the teaching itself. You could put whatever face you want here, it doesn't matter. If the person is articulate, that's great, but put the credit to the teaching itself. So I could be anyone. Peace, peace, peace. Okay, I'm going to put this back up. Book of Charts, freeze it. Okay, so we're gonna get into the Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita, this comes from the Swami Dayananda tradition. He wrote a home study course. It's a 4,000-page text. And it's commentaries on Shankara's commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita. It's as closest as I've found personally, but also in this tradition that we found, that teaches the non-dual nature of reality. See, there's many versions of Bhagavad Gita, and they can be translated depending on the author's understanding of reality. And that's the little bit of a problem today, because you think, oh, it's the Bhagavad Gita, I'm going to read it. But who translated that text? And what do they understand about reality? That's what you have to ask. So this comes from Swami Dayananda, and he was a disciple of Chinmayananda, who you may know, and they're one of the greatest proponents of non-dual wisdom that we know, since Shankara actually. One of the most accurate and one of the most comprehensive systems that there's no way you can argue it. It's that complete. Okay. And we're also going to cover a few Upanishad texts. Upanishads are, of course, eternal texts. They share the common and address the eternal human problem. And so does Bhagavad Gita. And that's what this text is about. It was applicable 5,000 years ago as much as it is applicable today. So this is an eternal human problem. And the human problem is not knowing who I am, not knowing what is my relationship to other people, to God, to nature, and not knowing what part do I play in this world, not knowing what is my purpose, not knowing what is my mission, what am I here to do, not knowing what is my uniqueness, where do I shine, where do I not, whom should I go to, whom should I not go to, and what is the point of all this? These are eternal questions that we've had since the beginning. And Bhagavad Gita, for that reason, has been an eternal text that addresses this question. So that's what we're going to get into. And it's going to get you to think. It's a proven, complete methodology, and it's completely logical and rational. So we can get right into it. So the story of the Bhagavad Gita is, we have Krishna. Krishna is the symbol of the self up here. So whenever we mention Krishna, it's almost as if the self is speaking. Yes, the self can speak, by the way. It's speaking when there's speaking and there's no speaking. The self is always, quote, speaking, because everything is the self. So Krishna is a symbol of the self. That's what we're aiming for, to realize the ultimate supreme reality. And so Krishna is a symbol of this. This is not, by the way, a war that has happened at some point, like some of these dualists will tell you. These are parables that demonstrate our human problem. So when I talk about these characters, don't think it actually happened. It's actually relating to you. So Krishna is you, Arjuna is you, Duryodhana is you. It's all parts of ourselves that we need to discriminate who I am and who I am not. So Krishna is the eternal teacher. And Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita is the seeker. He's a symbol of the one that is recognizing there's more than meets the eye. That's more than materiality. And Duryodhana is you could say, the symbol of the material part of ourselves, the selfish, the one that wants more, wants for myself, wants to keep it all. So there's a war between these two characters, Arjuna and Duryodhana. And this is actually a war that's happening in us, human beings. It's not outside. So just keep that in mind as we go through the story. So what happens is, they're basically archetypes, Duryodhana, Arjuna, and Krishna. And what happens is, Arjuna is having a crisis on the battlefield and he cannot decide what to do. And so he consults Krishna, and then Krishna, thankfully Arjuna was confused. If he wasn't confused, there would be no program, right? So likely this guy was, needed some help. So what Krishna said is what we're teaching now. Yeah. So it's a battle going on between good and evil, and Arjuna is obviously on the side of the good, Duryodhana is on the side of the bad, and they're actually one and the same in us. It's a tug of war that we're having between ourselves, between the material side of us and the spiritual side of us. So don't feel guilty if one moment you feel connected to everyone and feel spiritual. and the next moment you just want to have a little bit of enjoyment, worldly enjoyment, don't feel guilty. That's what Maya does. Okay, it's just built in. We all have it. So, and we're confused. Like, who am I then? Why do I want moksha? Why do I want the ultimate, to realize the ultimate supreme reality? But at the same time, I want a house and I want to have a little bit of money on the side. Like, why is that? Well, that's just because that's how Maya is. It's innocent. There's nothing wrong with it. We're just here to let you know that the material side of you is going to continue, but it's not you. Okay? The you part is that self-awareness, consciousness. The material side is all part of the mechanics of Maya. So what happens is Arjuna and Duryodhana, you got the Pandavas and the Kauravas team, and there are actually two sides. There are two sides of the brothers, and they actually ended up merging together under the supervision of Bhima. And Bhima is the enlightened being. He's like the caretaker for both sides. But what happens is there's some conflict that happens between the Kauravas and the Pandavas, the Arjuna and the Duryodhana side. So they decide, the only way to settle this is let's just play a game of dice. So they go and the Arjuna's side couldn't resist, and it's like, I want to play dice. But what happens is Duryodhana decided to cheat in the game of dice. Actually, he wasn't playing. Actually, he hired the greatest dice player in the country, and the Pandavas, that is the Arjuna side, they knew about this. They said, well, there's no way, this guy is too good, we're going to lose. But then the other side said, well, yeah, but if it's meant to be, who can resist a good game of dice? And so they decided to play anyway. And what happened was, as the evening went on, the Arjuna side kept losing everything. They lost their land, and then eventually they came to the point of actually even giving themselves to the Kauravas. And then, not only that, but their wife, because there was one wife for all the five of them, even Draupadi, the wife, was given to the Kauravas, to the Duryodhana side. And so later on, what happened was they were actually released because Draupadi told the king that to release her five husbands, because she was sort of insulted, and the king, the blind king, metaphor for ignorance, who was the father of Duryodhana, by the way, said, this is probably going to have a bad consequence that we insulted Draupadi. So he asked Draupadi, I'll give you any favor that you want, just so that, the word doesn't go around that we insulted you. And Draupadi requested that she and the five husbands get released. And they got released, but they were sent to exile by Duryodhana for 13 years. So they had to hide. And the agreement was that if they get discovered in these 13 years, then they will have another 13 years added on top of that. But they weren't discovered. So what happened was, after the 13 years, they were finally, they finally came back, and they wanted I'm talking about the Pandavas side. The Pandavas is the Arjuna side. They came back to Duryodhana, and they said, okay, well, we did our 13-year exile. Now we want our land back. And because Duryodhana was so consumed with selfishness and greed, that part of ourselves that is it's just not willing to rationalize or reason. It's not willing to negotiate. It's just so selfish that it's like, I don't want to hear your side. I am right, you are wrong, and that's stubborn side of it. That's Duryodhana. And we can all identify, that's the material side of ourselves. So don't feel guilty if there's this identification. It's just, it's the field, it's ignorance. So Duryodhana wasn't paying any attention. He didn't want to negotiate, and didn't want to give any land back to the Pandavas team, to Arjuna, that is. And so they decided the only way to settle the deal was to have a war. It went on for 18 days, I think. 18 days, I think. And so they both decided, Duryodhana and Arjuna decided to go to one of the most powerful characters in that time, was Krishna. And Krishna had one of the largest armies. So they went to Krishna to ask, if they could make a deal, if they could have the army. And Krishna was sleeping in his little palace. And that's when Duryodhana and Arjuna, they walked in while Krishna was sleeping. And Duryodhana positioned himself at the head of Krishna. And Arjuna positioned himself at the feet of Krishna. Now, what are the feet symbols of? This is another symbolism here. Feet are a symbolism of understanding. That it is that which stands, that stands under. That's why they're worshipped in India, whether people know about this or not. It's because they support you. Your whole body, everything is supported in your feet. So they're a symbol of the self. And Duryodhana was at his, the head, the part that wants to, intellectualize, just have a deal. And so, because Arjuna was sleeping, Krishna was sleeping, when he opened his eyes, the first person he saw was Arjuna, because he was sleeping like this, and then he opened his eyes, and Arjuna is at his feet. So he couldn't see Duryodhana on his head. And he said, well, because I saw Arjuna first, he can choose whether he wants me or the army. And Arjuna said, well, I want you, Lord. I choose you. I want the truth. That is, see how that Arjuna is a seeker, the symbol, that sattvic part of ourselves, that's not really interested in more drama, more world battles. We're interested in the truth. So this symbolism implies how, as we slowly transform, our interests start to change. So we start to ask for different things. In this case, Arjuna asked for the truth. And Duryodhana was like, well, this guy is, totally goofy, because I get the whole army. So Duryodhana was very happy. So Duryodhana, got up and he got the whole army. But Arjuna wanted the truth. He wanted to, because he knew that, Krishna is a smart guy, and they've been friends for a long time. So he decided to choose his friend. So what happens next is they're both heading, the ultimate moment. They're both heading to the battlefield. And Krishna is the charioteer of Arjuna's the charioteer for Arjuna, and they're riding this chariot to the middle of the battlefield in the center, so that Arjuna can get a better view about the two armies, just to go and get a preview. And that's when Arjuna sees his guru, Bhishma, and his great archer and warfare trainer, what's his name again? Drona. So he sees these two characters and he has an emotional breakdown. He goes, there's no way I can kill my friends. And the reason they were both on Duryodhana's side, even though they were friends, is because, for example, Bhishma owed Duryodhana's father a favor. And so obviously in this case, he was on Duryodhana's side to owe them a favor. So Arjuna recognized this and he was totally emotionally having a breakdown. He was like, this is impossible. How can I do this? It's probably not going to capture the camera. And then Arjuna finally comes to the point and he says, I can't do this. I don't have the will, I don't have the power, I don't have the motivation. And he drops down his bow and arrow, and he just gets totally discouraged. 1 minute ago, he was totally uplifted. He was ready to go. He was ready to participate in life. And next moment, totally discouraged. Now, you may relate to some moments what this implies. It's one moment, everything's fine in our life. And then the next moment, some trigger comes and it totally discourages us. It wipes away all of our, what we depended on, it totally erased. So this is the problem with unmanaged emotions, is that as long as our emotions remain unmanaged, we're going to be subject to the whims of life's ups and downs. And it's going to seem like your knowledge isn't reliable, it's shaky, because emotions are still strong. So that's why we first go through karma yoga, to get this emotionality, which is a result of conditioning, especially in the Western society. India doesn't have a problem with this so much, by the way, because they're naturally born they follow dharma because they have no choice. They're not as, for example, as rich as the Westerners. We have too many choices, so we get exposed to so many things, and we develop inconsistencies in our emotional temperaments. Like if you, for example, go to certain countries and you'll see that the Western children are like ADD, totally dominated, and then children from India or Bali, totally calm. This is not a coincidence, it's just how we grow up. So in the West, dealing with emotions is super, super, super important, and we have to really stress that out. So Arjuna gets emotional and he sees his two teachers. He throws down his bow and arrow and says, I want fight. Okay. And that's when Krishna now starts to teach Arjuna about the nature of reality. So now we're going to go into the actual scripture of the Bhagavad Gita and read about the story. Okay. I'm going to go like this. You probably see it better. To his distressed, tearful friend, who was overwhelmed by compassion, by the thought of those he was about to kill, Krishna spoke the following words. How does this crisis justify the despair that has overtaken your mind? It is unbecoming for an upright person to behave in this way. It does not increase your renown, nor does it lead to an auspicious end. To give into your emotions does not help you. You are a great warrior. Let go of these debilitating feelings and face this situation in a manly way. So here we're having Arjuna lost his resolve. He suddenly doesn't know what to do. He knew what to do, but then when emotions got to him, he suddenly lost his resolve. He no longer knows what to do. And this is what happens in life. We for example, we're on the right track, and then something happens, and then we get off track. And that's because we still haven't done the work. So here Krishna is simply saying, let go of these feelings. They're there. Sure, we're going to deal with them. But let go of them and do what you need to do. Because if you don't do what you need to do, what you're meant to do, then you're going to have problems. You're just going to delay your whole journey. You're not going to be a good role model because people are always looking at you. You're always being looked up to, whether you know about it or not. And you're just gonna, you're just not gonna, you're gonna feel guilty. So to give in to your emotions does not help you. Arjuna said, O destroyer of demons. Now this is actually a symbolism. The reason he says, O destroyer of demons is, Arjuna is like, look, I've got to kill humans. And you're the guy that deals more about mind stuff. Demons is just a metaphor for the mind, like the erratic mind. So he's kind of like, telling, hey, Krishna, I don't think you understand me here. I'm going to kill human beings. How can I kill these brave men whom I respect and are worthy of worship? It would be better to beg for alms than to kill my revered teachers, that is Drona and Bhima. The pleasure of killing them would be stained with blood. It is not clear to me whether our deaths or theirs would be most beneficial. After we kill them, what use is living? I can't see any course of action that will remove heaven or that will remove the pain that has overcome me, even if I were to gain an unrivaled kingdom in heaven or on earth. I am faint of heart and confused about what I should do. I take refuge in you. Please tell me what is best for me. So this is actually a critical moment that happens, is that there's a point in life where you recognize that you can't do it on your own. Because I say this often, if you knew how to pull this off, how to realize who you are and who you're not, you would have done it a long time ago. But you haven't. So for that reason, Arjuna realizes in this moment, standing in the battlefield, that he just doesn't have the knowledge and the ability and the resolve to solve this on his own. So that's when the relationship between Krishna and Arjuna, which were friends, turns into student and teacher. And Arjuna gives permission to Krishna and says, please teach me. So similarly, one on this journey of the knowing nature of self has to come to a point where they realize that, hey, I can't do it by myself. I have to give permission to a teaching, to the guru, the remover of darkness. Darkness is a symbol of ignorance, in order to come to the ultimate realization. And this is where the bus stops for most of us, is because we're not able to give permission, because we think we can do it on our own. Well, I've got the books, I've got the knowledge, I've got the years of experience. Why do I need a teacher? And this is so common, so prevalent in the world. It's as predictable as the sun rising tomorrow and setting today. Because that's how ego's self-interest is to preserve the status quo by keeping its false sense of authority by saying that I can figure it out on my own. You can't figure it out on your own. There is no way you can figure it on your own. And this is an eternal problem. That's why the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads exist. So that the student who finally comes to the point and says, look, I've tried everything. I've done years of this work and that work and meditation and reading and listening. Nothing works. Please help me. So Arjuna comes to this point, and similarly the student also has to come to this point. Otherwise, nothing happens. You just don't, you might as well just write off this incarnation, go back into the material world, and then start all over again when you're reborn. So the sooner one comes to this point, the better. So this last stage, of course, is surrendering. And you've heard of this before. Totally surrender to the guru. In this, guru is you, by the way. Guru is a self. There is no teacher here because it's all in you. So I'm just an aspect of yourself. So when we say surrender to the guru, it means surrender to yourself. It's yourself speaking to you. It's the awareness. Surrender to that, because that's all there is in existence. But we're going to get later into the mechanics of why that is so, why is that true, and why is, when I say there's only the self, you're probably asking, well, show me, give me the logic, and we'll get into that. Having spoken thus, the great warrior cast down his weapon, said, I shall not fight, and became silent. Okay, summary verses 1 to 10. The 4 stages of enlightenment. By the way, that word enlightenment, we're gonna get into what that actually means, so there's no misconception about this word that flies around in the Western world, even in the Eastern world also. We have to come to a common standard what that means. Okay, so the 4 stages of enlightenment. I'm just going to put this up. Samsara. Samsara is this. Everything below that line is samsara. Okay, samsara means what is changing constantly. There is not one thing that it's not changing. The only thing that is not changing, which is not a thing, is you. Because you're there observing the changes. And the changes are happening, but they're not changing you. So samsara is everything that is changing. Okay, samsara, so what causes samsara, right? So samsara is caused by self-ignorance and is recognized as 3 emotional problems. Okay. So samsara is believing that your thoughts, world, and experiences are real, and it's a lack of understanding that you are already whole and complete. Okay, so this is where we begin the teaching, a little bit deeper into what the self is. See, the self, you are already complete and whole. Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter for now. But there is actually nothing lacking or missing in you. But samsara causes, that's what Maya does, it causes you to think that objects are going to make you happy. That's why we chase for objects in the world. Well, we chase for money, we chase for partners, we chase for relationship, we chase for good feelings, we chase for feeling good, we chase for power, fame, status. We chase for things. All these things are samsara. And samsara is believing that those things that we're chasing are real. See, why are we chasing them? Because we think they're real. If we knew they're not real, would you chase them? No way, impossible. Because you would know it's not going to last. I'm going to get it. There's going to be a temporary enjoyment, but it's not going to last. So Maya causes us to believe that these things, that's why we're chasing them. The whole world outside is about success, attainment, achievement, status, power. Why? Because Maya creates this illusion that makes us think it is real, therefore it's worthy of pursuit. Okay, that's what samsara is. And it's recognized, so here's how you recognize that you're in samsara. Attachment to situations, things, and people. Raga. I mean, this is a little bit of a question, like really, is there something that I'm not attached to other than people, things, situations? That's all we're attached to. We're only attached to things, people, and situations. So if there is something in this world that you're attached to right now, then you're in samsara. If you're attached, okay, even if you said this to me, I'm not attached to anything. I will say this, are you attached to your body? I mean, are you attached to having a healthy, there's nothing, I mean, it's an extreme example. Are you attached to having a healthy body? That's why we have all these gyms and all these workouts. People are running and doing these workouts and beautiful bodies, They're not necessarily interested in the world, but they're interested in what? The body. That's why women are spending like hours just putting, their hair, and men are spending months on end building big bodies, and even the intellect. We're building our intellect to be smart, to be intelligent, to get educated. So that's attachment. There's attachment to the body and the mind. Find me someone who isn't attached to that. It's very rare to find someone who's not attached to their body and their mind. That's what liberation is. There is no attachment to anything. Anything underneath this line, if there's no attachment to anything in here, then you're liberated. If there's one attachment to anything, family members, objects, I mean feelings, emotions, things, money, security, that's a big one. If there's attachment to anything, you are in samsara. And so what, right? So what? Okay, I am attached. Like, so what? Well, it causes, what does attachment result in eventually? Pain, because it doesn't last. You know, at some point, I have a great partner, everything's working out, but then what? You're just now worried about that leaving. Now you have to maintain that. I am, you know, attached to saving the world. How about that one? You know that one, saving the world? It's another attachment. What world? The whole world is but a dream. Just like a dream you have last night or you will have today. When you wake up from your dream, do you go, oh, I really need to go back into that dream and change a few things around? Do you do that? No way. Then why do you do that in this dream? Because Maya makes this dream so real. And just like the dream you had, when you're in that dream, what happens? You don't question the dream. You're just totally participating in the dream as if that's all there is. Same thing in this dream. You participate in this dream as if that's all there is. So Vedanta, through the course that we're going to do, you'll realize and eventually see that this is but a dream, just another dream, and it has nothing to do with you. When I say you, I mean self. We're going to get more into dream metaphor because it's a very powerful teaching tool as we go on. And you're going to see that eventually we're going to cancel out the three realities, which is the waking state, which we're in now, the dream state, and the deep sleep state. And you realize when we cancel those three states out, that what remains is that which is aware of those three states, which is you. And then you realize that I'm totally free. Because what is your experience other than these three states? You're either in this waking state, hello, you know, this is waking state, right? You're either in the dream state or you're in the deep sleep state. There's nothing else other than those three states. And then when we go to the teaching of these three states and we cancel them, you go, well then what is there to worry about if all the three states have nothing to do with me? Self, awareness, consciousness. That which is aware of these three states. And they don't affect me, do you? Do those three states affect you? They don't. If they do affect you, then how would you know who you are today? Because you'd be a subject to the current state that you've been changed to. You know what I mean? It's like a screensaver. You know those old screensavers in the early 1990s, where you know if the screensaver stopped and then the print of the image of the screen would eventually embed that image onto the monitor. That's why we have screensavers. So if you were like that, then the next experience that comes on wouldn't be pure, would it? Because now it would be overlaid by the previous experience. You see that? See the logic? So you're completely unaffected by experiences in both the waking state, which is here now, the dream state, which will be tonight, and the deep sleep state. B. Mental disturbances caused by expectation-induced attachments. You know that you're in samsara. When I say samsara once again, I mean everything underneath that line. You know you're in samsara if you have certain expectations. Expectations towards what? Think about this now. Do you have expectations about how the world should be, how people should be, how they should act towards you, how you should act towards the world, how how much success you should have, expectations about what you should learn, what you should... Expectations are nothing but wanting, desiring things to be different than what they are. So if there is expectations about anything, towards any person, towards any objects, towards the world, a world being a different, a better place, that's a huge one, right? If there's any of that, you're in samsara. And side note, Isvara, when I say Isvara is Maya, it's creator, God. Isvara doesn't care, this is where some people walk out, it doesn't care what you expect. Only you care. Because it's your own personal likes and dislikes. They have nothing to do with somebody else's likes and dislikes. So that's the pain. You see how suffering is produced as a result of being caught in samsara? Because how often do your expectations get fulfilled? Almost never. Rarely. And that's what, and when our expectations get fulfilled, what happens? We suffer. We go, oh, you know, and then we take it personally. Something's wrong with me. So this is the problem, being caught in samsara and choosing to swim in this constant ocean of samsara. Is you get your highs, but you also get your lows. Sometimes you get what you want, sometimes you don't get what you want. And the problem is people settle for this. They go, oh, you know, it's not so bad here. You know, I know there's suffering, but also I get my good share here. So what's the problem? I can take that. Well, if you want to think like that, then, I mean, I don't think you do, because then you wouldn't be here. But one comes to the point when they realize I've absolutely had it with ups and downs, because I'm constantly being like tumbled by these ocean of these unpredictable waves, and I want stability, because inherently you understand you are stability. And what is stability? That which never changes. It's always stable. It's constant. And what is constant? You. So we all inherently understand we are that, quote, stability, that constancy, that never changing isness. That's why we're chasing for worldly objects, which we'll get into deeper, by the way. We'll get into psychology of why do you chase objects. Very interesting. And even the thought of the loss of the object causes deep pain. This is another problem in samsara, is that when I get what I want, like you think it's good news. Well, yes, for a while, but then what happens is anxiety comes and I start to worry if I'm going to lose this, or how long can I sustain this, or how long can I keep this. This is very typical in relationships. When we get a relationship, then we worry, now I have to keep this relationship. Or even the thought of losing it causes pain and anxiety. And then what happens when this pain is there? Are you thinking about the self? Are you thinking about, you know, the truth while you're caught up in the pain of losing an object? No way. So that's the problem with samsara. Now just imagine hundreds of these little anxieties in the back of our minds. There's no way someone's going to spend their time or interest pursuing knowledge, the truth. So that's the problem of choosing samsara versus knowledge. Is that you're going to get what you want, but you're going to be so consumed with the endless, beautiful, fascinating, gorgeous, irresistible offerings that samsara has to provide, that you're not going to be caring nor concerned about realizing who and what you are, and that is awareness, consciousness, bliss, limitless awareness. And C, Raja and Shoka, which is expectations and attachments, they cause delusion. They bring about lack of discrimination. So when we have expectations and attachments towards things, what happens, the price you pay is discrimination completely leaves you. And discrimination, here's the closing thought, is the primary quality for moksha. You need clear discrimination. Between what? Like discrimination between what? Discrimination between satya, awareness, and mithya. Mithya means, everything below the line is mithya. Mithya means apparently real. Satya means truth, that is, which is eternal. So discrimination means constantly differentiating between that who I am, Satya, awareness, self, existence, and that who I am not, everything below the line. And an expectation and attachment to worldly objects, people, experiences take away that primary quality of discrimination, making moksha impossible. So that's the price one pays by choosing to indulge in samsara. There's nothing wrong with it, but you're going to come to a point and say, this is not working. I get what I want, but it doesn't last, and I've had it. And then you come to Vedanta. Okay. Point 2. Samsara can be solved and removed on one's own. We're helpless. When problems come, how should I react? Should I stand and fight, or should I take flight? This is an important point, and it's reiterating that you can't see. This is where the ego wants to come in and say, I can't figure this out on my own, but you can't. We had rare circumstances like Ramana Maharshi. We're going to talk about it later, but the chances of realizing the ultimate supreme reality on your own is so small, you might as well just not even consider it a possibility. So that's why we need a teacher who's not caught up or enmeshed in Maya, so they can help you to bring you to the ultimate supreme nature of who you are, eternal bliss, existence, Sat Chitananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. So that's the aim of Vedanta. Point 3. To solve samsara, the help of someone who is not caught up in it is required. If your seeking is sincere, the teacher will appear. If you are seeking a teacher, you are probably not ready for one. And this is another important point, is that we need a teacher. The only reason Vedanta worked for me is because I came to a teacher who wasn't caught up in samsara, but also, number 2, talked about both self and mithya. So once I understood both realities, that's what moksha is. It's understanding the whole picture. Nothing is left out. Because what happens if something's left? What does that mean? That means Advaita, duality. Advaita means it means totality, everything. So for that reason, if your seeking is sincere, eventually a teacher will present themselves, because Isvara uses these jivas, these bodies, on its behalf. Like, I've got no choice to do this. I've got nothing else to do, so I do it. I teach it. So Isvara uses uses probably a negative word, but he uses individuals as teachers to deliver this information to those who are sincere students. And finally, surrender to the teacher. The teacher is the teaching, by the way. It's not the person, it's the teaching specifically. Feeling sorry for yourself because if your suffering is not enough to receive the teaching. So if you go home and you go, I've done everything, what's wrong with me? I cannot do this. I'm like, come on, when is it time? I've had enough. Isvara doesn't care. It doesn't work like that. Nobody's going to hear your pettiness, feeling sorry for yourself. It doesn't work. You have to be willing to be taught. That's it. If you're willing to be taught, that is shravana, listen, manana, reflect, and nididhyasana, remove the remaining obstacle. If you do those 3, this is as predictable as 2 plus 2. There's no way you can fail. And let's just conclude for the final 3 reasons not to grieve. Although in the no man's land between 2 armies, that's when he's standing in the battlefield, Krishna, as if smiling, said. Now the reason he says as if smiling is because Krishna has been in this before. And Krishna's like, oh boy, here we go again. I know what the problem is, but Arjuna doesn't know. So he's like, everything's fine, He just doesn't want to smile to insult Arjuna, so he's as if smiling. Said, although you speak words of wisdom, You grieve for those who are not worthy of grief. Wise people do not grieve for the living or for the dead. Now the question is, well, what is there other than the living or for the dead? Wise people points to the enlightened ones who know nature of reality. Do not grieve for the living or for the dead. Neither for the family, for the friend or the foe, because they understand it's just a dream. And Krishna understands this, so that's why he says this to Arjuna. But Arjuna thinks that these people are real. Just like, we think that this person's real. So we grieve for them. We go, oh, they're going through a hard time, so we get involved with their emotionality. But wise people do not grieve for the living or for the dead. Even if someone dies, it's just a dream. It's got nothing to do with me. It's like somebody dies in your dream. But if you know it's a dream, you don't grieve because you know it's a dream. You and I and all these kings have always existed. We will exist forever. Okay, now we begin the real teaching. So here Krishna is saying to Arjuna is that everyone you see in this world, on this battlefield, everyone has always existed. There was no beginning and there is no ending. So Arjuna is not confused, like, what do you mean? Because all I see is bodies. But Krishna also sees bodies, just like Arjuna, but understands that there is something prior, there's something beyond what Arjuna cannot see. And that's what Krishna is referring to. And he's referring to, obviously, consciousness, but Arjuna doesn't realize that yet. So consciousness has no beginning, we're going to get into the qualities of consciousness, that is who you are, and it's timeless. So that's what Krishna is explaining here to Arjuna. Okay, so Arjuna doesn't get this because he thinks he's the body, he thinks I am born and I die. And yes, there is a part of you that is born, this body is born, it dies, but that is not you. So you don't die, the body dies. But Arjuna doesn't see this. He knows it intellectually, but he doesn't understand this. So it's easy to have a conversation here in the class, but in the actuality on the battlefield, when you know you're about to die or kill someone, and those emotions strike, then you really know, if you're still caught in samsara, whether you know who you are or not. Even when you consider that the indwelling jiva, or the person, is born, lives and dies, and gains another body, is there any cause for grief? So here what it's saying is, even when you recognize and accept the fact that this body will die one day, and another body will be reborn, so a new chance will be given, what are you possibly grieving for? So what that you're going to die and you didn't get it? Actually, there's later on, Arjuna's going to say, what happens if I don't attain moksha in this life? And Krishna says, don't worry about it. You just, the body's going to die, but all of the learnings, all of the effort that you've taken from the previous life, it is that the essence of it is forwarded to the next life. So you just continue. That's how this nature works. And the rebirth stops is when you finally know who you are, and you're no longer mixing yourself of who you're not. That is the body and the mind. So there's nothing to worry about. Okay, sense perceptions, we're almost finished. Sense perceptions give rise to the ever-changing sensations of pleasure and pain when they contact sense objects. So here, sense perceptions, which is the world. See the gross body, that's the world, the gross world that you can touch. When they contact these sense instruments, the ears, skin, eyes, tongue, nose, and then they send a signal to the brain, and they give reality to that perception. So if I put a rose here, then it's going to enter the nose and it's going to go into the mind, and then the mind, the intellect interprets what that smell means, and then the ego causes you to act. Go, say something like beautiful rose. That's what the ego is, a doer. Ego is that which does. So here what Krishna is saying is that you cannot stop this process. You're constantly having the world contact these sense instruments, and they're constantly giving you an experience of the world. Even now, speaking this, you're having an experience of listening. Why? Because there's a stimuli entering your ears, your eyes, and then your intellect is processing that, and your ego is causing you to remain seated in that seat. And if you suddenly don't like to hear something, that the intellect interprets that as not valid, not true, sends a signal to the ego causes you to stand up and walk out of the room. That's how it works. So Krishna is saying you cannot stop this process. This is just how it happens behind the scenes. You have no choice but to endure them. You have no choice but to endure them. Only a discriminating person who sees pleasure and pain equally is fit for liberation. Okay, now we get into the ultimate qualification for Vedanta. A person who sees both pleasure and pain equally, they are the ones who is fit for liberation. So think about what this means. If you prefer pleasure over pain, I don't think you prefer pain over pleasure, but if you prefer pleasure over pain, then we have to work with something. Now, why does it say that one who sees pain and pleasure equally is fit for liberation? Why do we say that? Because you have no choice but to endure them. They're going to keep affecting the stimulus, and you can't stop it. So if you're constantly caught in going, oh, I love this, oh, I hate this, do you think you're going to spend time with knowledge, with contemplating self? There's no way you're going to do that. So when you can come to this to a point when you say, hey, look, yes, this feels good, but it's going to go away. And you say equally, yeah, this feels like, like hell, but it's also going to leave. Like the Sufis say, this too shall pass. When you understand that, that's when you qualify for liberation. Then we can really, have a fast track to moksha. What is unreal doesn't exist, and what is real never ceases to exist. The essence of both is known by the wise. No one can destroy that which pervades everything. What is that which pervades everything? Existence. See, existence is not something above the line. Existence is everywhere. It's even now, this is also existence. It's like space. It's all happening in existence. We're going to get much deeper into the metaphor of existence, the self. So what is moksha? Before the next session, we're going to get deeper into what moksha is. Moksha for now is knowing what is real and what is not real. Moksha is knowing the difference between what is real and what is not, or apparently real. And when you can constantly discern the difference between those two, that's called a liberated person. When you're no longer confused with reality and unreality, when you're no longer confused between the two, then then one is, quote, self-realized. So tomorrow we're going to get into digging deeper into what discrimination is, how Vedanta helps remove, how does Vedanta solve this eternal problem, and we're just going to continue with the text. And there's one comment here. So that which pervades everything is self or existence. And here's just a little experiment. If I say to you, so what does all pervasive means? It means there is no place where it's not. So if I say to you, imagine being in the farthest reaches of the universe. and there is nothing there. Is that true?
Depends what you mean by a thing.
Oh, okay. There's just nothing there. I know it's kind of a limiting language, but imagine being in the farthest reaches of the universe and there's nothing there. Is that true? No. You know why? Because you're there. You see, how would you know that nothing is there unless you're there to report that there was nothing there? So that's what all pervasive means. That means there is no place where you are not. So tomorrow we will continue, and I'm going to close. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.